This is Sunday, January the 9th, 1983. It's 3:30 in the afternoon. I just got up to the nursing home. I was watching the football games, but the only game that was any decent was the Dallas and Tampa Bay, and it was only in the first quarter, so I didn't want to stay home that long, so I'd get up here so we could record and talk about other things.
Such as what, Red?
Well, a little bit about the family, let you know how they all are. Marion's hand is still bad. Nothing she can do about it. They can't seem to do anything, so she's going to a neurologist to see if there's something they can do with it. She still can't use it, and is still in pain. Mickey's doing pretty good. He's been pretty busy. He's been doing a lot of construction, believe it or not, that lasts till 3, 4, 5 in the morning in business places that can't have certain work partitions and stuff like that done during the daytime while there's business going on. So he's been getting this here after-hours business where he is remodeling or building additions, rooms or dividers or something like that. It's been keeping him busy besides his regular work, which is going along pretty good now too. And and Midge is doing fine. She's busy. She's working every night till 7 or 8, from about 7 in the morning. It seems like everybody is rushing to get their license at this time of the year, and I suppose because they're afraid they won't have the money when it's due. I think they got till February, but they don't sell any until after the 1st of January. So, and then she's doing bookkeeping on the side for a couple businesses on weekends. And the only thing else that's new around here is Helmer Helgerson had a heart attack, went in the hospital, just before Christmas sometime. And then he was home a couple days before Christmas. And he wasn't fully recovered, but he was so happy to be out of the hospital. He goes over to the VFW for a brandy and stays out a couple hours, and of course he's in among crowds, and in his weakened condition he caught a cold from somebody, his resistance being low, and wound up with pneumonia, so he's back in the hospital now. And Ma and I went downstairs to see him a couple times, and he can't sleep. As soon as he's having real difficulty breathing, it's almost like emphysema, but he don't smoke or anything. His lungs are so swollen, and he can't lay down. Sat up all night, and all he does is cuss about being in here and the noise in here. And of course, the nurses say, yeah, this is a noisy place. There's no carpeting or anything, so no matter what they do, even walking down the hall, you can hear everything at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I got here, about 7 this morning before I come up to feed Ma breakfast, and I got off at the second floor, and I sneaked a look in there, and he was sleeping. And he was sleeping pretty good. But I think this is the first night since last Tuesday, and this is Sunday, that he's even been able to close his eyes. And he's still kind of hard to calm down. He's got a lot of ideas, and he's a worrywart. And of course, most of it comes because he is a procrastinator. Huh, Ray? Here.
Oh, don't say that to him, Red.
No, but Ray don't procrastinate anymore. He went through that stage. But Elmer's just starting it. Yeah, he procrastinates on everything. He's been paying $200 a year insurance on his van, and he said, you get it cheaper, don't you, through AARP? I said, oh, yeah. I said, well, $200, you're being taken. And he says, well, I said, let me see your policy. I looked at his policy. He's got all the coverage in the world except he has no collision. So all he's paying for is the other guy, the uninsured driver, all kinds of liability and all that sort of thing. But he didn't even know he didn't have any collision. He had no deductible, nothing. So now he's scared he won't even drive the van.
How do you like that? Dad's making a man out of him. He's got to read everything he gets now.
Yeah, then he wanted me to look at his house insurance. And sure enough, there again, he's paying, oh God, I think he was paying $180 a year for $26,000, which is only half, less than half of what his place is worth. No full replacement. I think only about $4,000 or $5,000 on his furnishings, and outbuildings. I think $500, and it was a farce. And that was State Farm too. So he asked about AARP, and I said, geez, I told you 11, 12 years ago that you should get it. So we called long distance on a toll-free number, and they quoted his place for $78,000, $28,000 on inside on the furnishings, and all the liabilities were a lot greater, medical and all that, or even a place to live, living expense in case something happened while it was being repaired and all that sort of thing. And he didn't have to pay as much as he was paying before. So his only worry, he says, well, the insurance company is right here if I have a claim, they're right here. Baloney. No insurance man is allowed to adjust a claim. That's against the law. They have to go to an adjuster. So what they do, you go to the insurance man if you have a claim. They call their company, and in this case, his company was up in Minnesota somewhere, and then they tell them where to go for an adjuster. And the adjuster is the same one that the Colonial Penn uses from Pennsylvania, only you call Colonial Penn direct. You don't deal with anybody here, with any insurance agents. Therefore, you save the commission. The insurance agent here in town told me he gets $50 commission every year on writing this policy, and that's what makes the insurance so high. So we got him the quotation and everything else. Now he hasn't signed it yet to put it in effect. He's procrastinating again. He says, I don't want all those bills in the first of the year. But he's sweating. He's worrying if there's going to be a fire or something, you know.
Oh, he's nuts.
And yet he's going to put it off till February so you don't have too many bills in January. But he's learned. He's on tranquilizers now. Maybe that'll help some, maybe quiet him down. But all he's doing is just cussing, guess him how he's doing. Oh, this blinkety blank place and all that stuff. That's all you hear from him.
You like that, Red?
No. Yeah, funny part, they're allowing them to sit up, and gee, you remember when I had my coronary, they raised hell when I let my feet hang over the side of the bed. Yeah, I don't know. He has bad angina pains. He had. I don't know. I don't think he is now, but of course pneumonia didn't help me. We're going to go down and see him in a little while, but we thought we'd get a little more conversation in here to kind of fill up this tape. You know what? Now, Susie is over visiting us today, and Michelle and Maureen are also here, and Susie is going to say a few words to Uncle Ray, Aunt Bev, Donnie, Danny, and Debbie.
Hi everybody, how are ya? We're doing real good. It was real good seeing Donnie this summer, and boy, we sure hope we'll get to see you guys pretty soon again too. And if we can get the girls to talk, I'll let them say hi to you guys.
Say hi to them. Go ahead, talk.
Just say hi.
Just say hi into the
This
mic.
is Michelle.
Boy, she's not talking. Come on, say something. Say hello, Uncle Ray.
You
You can talk?
Okay. Here's Maureen. She'll say hi.
Maureen's going to say hi. Just say hi.
Hi.
That's it. Now you say hi.
What are you doing so funny?
That was kind of faint, wasn't it? Hold it for a minute. They're both bashful. But you wouldn't know it if they're not talking. They're not bashful. But they know this is going on the mic. You want to see how you sound on here? Say yes. Yeah, I want to hear. Say, I want to hear myself. Go ahead. Say something real quick, and I'll let you hear it. Okay?
Say hi, Grandpa. Hi.
Louder.
Hi.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Well, say, have a good trip to Uncle. Have a good trip.
Have a good trip.
Damn it, girl. You want to say that too?
Have a good trip.
There you are. The rest of this will be a story about the family. Back in about 1930 was the first time I met your mother. She used to come to watch us play football with some other girlfriends. And I remember she used to drive a little 1929 Ford convertible with the rumble seat. And after the game, she used to drive a lot of us home, or we'd be in the back in the rumble seat or all over the car and singing and all that sort of thing. About that time, late in November, I got hurt. I got a punctured kidney in a game, and when I came home from the hospital, Ma visited me. All I knew about her then was her name was Margaret Winnick. I knew her father was an alderman of the 39th Ward in Chicago at that time, but that's about all I knew about her. But we got acquainted, and we've had a few dates. And it was off and on. Sometimes I'd go to a party and she'd be there, and sometimes I'd go there with her to a party. And then about that time, I started driving a little panel truck for the In and Outdoor Games Company, which was a syndicate outfit. And I was installing slot machines and pinball games in all the speakeasies around the city, different areas. Some areas I'd have to say Al so-and-so sent me, and I get into another area and I say Al so-and-so sent me. It would be a different Al. And the owners of the place, they had no choice. They had to take the slot machines and the pinball games. And we tell them the first week out of the receipts of that, when we collect, they would get $10, and the syndicate and ourselves would divide the balance 50-50. The second week, we would get the $10, and the syndicate and the owner of the place would divide 50-50. And the third week, the syndicate would get the $10, and the owner of the place and outfit I worked for, they would divide 50-50. needless to say that when we went for collections on these machines, 2 of the weeks the syndicate people would ride with us and kind of protect us. And the third week, when they were getting assured of getting the $10 and nothing more, they didn't bother to ride with us, and that's when all our drivers start getting held up. But then they put me on collection, and I got my brother Ray to drive the old panel truck with for the in and outdoor games, and he started installing the machines, and I did the collecting. And they got a special car for me at that time. We didn't have high compression engines, but they had one because only the police had them. So I don't know where they got them. Special carburation, everything else. Every night when I'd come in with the collection at the end of the day, the car would go in the garage and they'd overhaul that is, to tune up the brakes, tune up everything, and everything would be all tip-top shape for the next day. So when I got chased, when I was alone by any hold-up men, I had pretty much the downtown area almost in a loop, and I knew how to dash up and down the alleys, and I could make any kind of a turn or U-turn right completely across all of the traffic, and the coppers seemed to know who I was. They didn't bother me, and if these guys were chasing me, why, they were in trouble. And then, as quickly as I could, I used to go to 304 West Randolph, and that was the headquarters of the syndicate. As you walked in the door with your little bag full of money, you went by a whole bunch of booths, and they're all a bunch of tough-looking guys there. And you'd get to the back room where Capone and the rest of them were, and you dump the money, and they take their collection out of it. Oh, then my dad found out I was doing this work for the syndicate, and being a government man, I had to quit that, and that was the end of that one. But my grandpa's friend, when he was a boyhood chum, was a guy named Spike O'Donnell. The whole city of Chicago was run by 3 hoodlums. Now that I know them, I can call them hoodlums. One was Spike O'Donnell, the other was Al Capone, and the other one was Bugs Moran. And Spike O'Donnell and Grandpa Becker were boyhood friends. Well, one time I went downtown with Grandpa, and he had to go into the city hall. And when he got into the city hall, Spike O'Donnell come walking up to him and says, "Hi, Frankie boy," you know. And they started talking about old times, and they were surrounded by about 5 or 6 big tough guys, you know, bodyguards. And he was asking Grandpa all about the family and about me. Do you have any kids and all that? And Grandpa told him, yeah, he had me, and I think I was, at that time, I guess I was in my 20s and not working, you know. So he sent him around, I'll give him a job. So Dad says, nope, I'm a government man. He says, but thank you anyhow. He says, I can't do that. So a couple of weeks passed, and I got a call at home, too, from a woman, and I was supposed to have a job. I was supposed to come to a certain address, and I did, and there was Spike O'Donnell. He had a job for me. Once a month, I was driving beer trucks from Milwaukee. I'd pick them up in Milwaukee. They'd come down from Canada, and I'd drive that into Chicago to the Bud Long Pickle Company. It was an open stake truck, and I had all the barrels out in the open on a stake truck, but it said Bud Long Pickles on it. And actually, I drove it all the way into about Division and Carlo, and there was a pickle factory, and I used to pull it in there, and that was the end of it, and I'd get $100. I'd do that once a month. Grandpa never did catch up on that, but but I was pretty well taken care of. And you know who else was driving? At that time was my friend. We got him in. That was Helmer Helgerson. He was driving them too. And as we used to come down from Milwaukee, we used to come down Waukegan Road. And Oh, some of those coppers along there, if they tried to stop you, all you had to do is make a phone call and they straightened them out. One time, one guy on a motorcycle way up on Waukegan Road, I can't remember where now, but it was pretty far north of Highland Park. He used to give chase on a motorcycle and try to put you over, and he did a couple times. And I guess he wasn't satisfied with his payoff. So one night the syndicate went out with a truck and they come tearing down there. And sure enough, this guy chased them, and about 2 guys in the back of them start rolling logs off the truck. And that was the end of that guy on the motorcycle. He wound up in the hospital, pretty well broken up. But that's the way they took care of things in them days. They're kind of rough bunch, but they didn't bother me. And I guess also they knew that what he was doing was really helping out his old friend Frankie, which was my grandpa, and O'Donnell made sure that I was taken care of. I only had to drive once a month, and I got $100, and so did Helmer. That's what he got for $100 once a month. That way they hired, say 30 guys. What happened was I went to the West Coast, and I went to Sacramento. I had hitchhiked from Fate, Texas. Another guy and I, Foster Basso, we had an old car, an old Chevy touring car in them days with some side curtains. And his father was a lamplighter, and he used to light the lamps with a sort of like a naphtha, more than a gasoline. And they had big 10-gallon cans of that. So he and I took the car that belonged to him, really. It was in his name, although I think his father owned it. And we filled this running board on the side with 10-gallon cans. So we must have about 10 10-gallon cans, all full of this here so-called naphtha gasoline that they use for lighting the streetlights. And we took off with a truck full of food, enough for 30 days, and a couple tarps, and we had about 5 or 6 spare tires that we picked up here and there. So if we got a flat, we just threw it away. They had clincher rims, and then they was a big job to change anyhow. And we took off, and we got as far as Fate, Texas, and that night our motor froze and cracked the block. So we sold everything there, and I hitchhiked. We both hitchhiked, and I got all the way to Sacramento, California, and he got somewhere around El Paso, and he called home and they wired him some money. He went back. Well, I worked all that winter at the Southern Pacific Railroad and played ball in the Winter League there, and that was the Pacific Coast Winter League. And on our team was guys like Stan Hack, Alex Camporis, Frenchie Bordegere, Dolph Kamali, all big leaguers later on in life. And we played ball that winter, but then I came back. I got a little bit lonesome myself. First time I was really away from home. So I came back in the March of, I guess it was 30. Yeah, I was 30 then. It was because the Depression was still on. And I started going with Ma again, and it wasn't until about 1933 when we really started going steady. And her dad died in the meantime, Mike Winnick, which was his name. He was Jewish, and Ma thought her name was Winnick, and she was Jewish, but that's a later story. I'll tell you more about that. So her mother, Grandma Garum, at that time called herself Margaret Burrow, and she took a liking to me, and they used to invite me all over all the time, and then they had speakeasies at that time. See, it was before Prohibition was repealed in '33. Had about 8 speakeasies. So I went to work for her, mostly to help her because I was going with Mom. There was no jobs anyhow. And I'd mix up 5, 10-gallon cans of straight alcohol, put in the flavor and the water and all that, and cut it and sell it for bourbon every morning at one of the speakeasies on Grand and Hamlin. I used to have about 100 bottles, all made up, 100 pints, and these guys would knock on the back door. They'd hand me $1, and I'd hand them a bottle. And we did that until the Prohibition was repealed in 1933. I was tending bar most of the time for that, and Ma and I were going pretty steady then. And then in 1933, the Prohibition was repealed. And, I took over the bartending job while Ma and that time Grandma started going with Ed Garham then, and they would take off for Cincinnati to see Auntie Babe or something, and they'd leave me alone with the tavern over the holidays. And well, there wasn't much money in it at that time, so finally Grandpa Becker got me into the mail service, and I got down to the post office, and I was working in the railway mail, sorting mail, and then I was making big money. I think the annual salary at that time for mail clerk was about $1,850 a year. But it was a good, steady job, so it was enough for Ma and I to get married on. So we got married in 1935 on my birthday, November the 27th, and that was it. And Grandma and Ed Garham had been living with us, and I was paying a rent at a place on Sacramento. Oh, what was the name of it? I think it was 2700 Sacramento, right near Logan Square, anyhow. And then he started trying to organize. Ed Garham, he started organizing the Garage Association up on the North Shore. Cars were parked all over the streets, and he told these garage dealers they joined his union. He'd see that they had plenty of business, and he did. He and another guy went out and slashed tires all night long. I guess the whole north side, they showing pictures in the papers. All the tires were flat. The police knew that he was trying to organize a union, but they couldn't prove this on him. So they charged him with conspiracy, and they sent him off to Joliet prison farm. Well, that was a breeze for him, but that finished his career as far as unions and the rough stuff was concerned. See, earlier, in about 1927, the famous Rondout mail robbery, Ed Garham was the driver of the car, and they used to show pictures of how they rounded up this whole gang and all that. That I guess it was almost before the FBI, and they had pictures of it in the World's Fair, and his picture was there. So he had been to Leavenworth, but he was the black sheep of the family. His sister was married to David Sarnoff, the head of the NBC, National Broadcasting Company. The other sister married somebody else high in society. The whole family was high, but Ed was a black sheep. He had run away from home, I guess he was about 16 or 17, and joined the Navy. And he was Atlantic Coast light heavyweight champ of the Navy. And so he always thought he was kind of a tough guy. So when he got out of the Navy, he was a natural. They grabbed him for the goon squads, when they were doing union organizing and all that. But he mellowed after he had gone to Joliet on that conspiracy charge trying to organize that garage dealers union. And then from then on, there wasn't much problem with him. And then about 1937, no, very early in 37, the post office, at the end of the Christmas 36 winter, before 37 comes, somewhere in that Christmas week, I got laid off at the post office. I wasn't certified. They hadn't held any examinations, civil service examinations, for a long time. So I went to Link Belt, and I had, early in my career, in about 1925, worked as a toolmaker apprentice, so I knew machine work and all that. So when I went to Link Belt, I lied about my education and everything else, and I told them I had 2.5 children. Actually, Michael was on the way, and that was all. And so they hired me, and as a junior engineer, which really what it entailed was running all kinds of big heavy equipment for mining machinery, and we were manufacturing coastal guns and locks and stuff for the big dams and spillways and all that sort of thing. It was about the biggest kind of equipment you could ever imagine. And then Michael was born in February the 19th of 1937. We lived at Artesian, which is a half a block west of Western, and we were about, I guess a full block south of Diversey at that time. So I went to work for Link Belt, and I was making big money then, as times were. Then they finished up their government contracts, and they sort of lost out, and so then I went to get a job, and someone told me there was a plant named Electromotive Corporation near LaGrange that was hiring. So I think it was January 8th or 9th, somewhere in through there. I took a streetcar. We lived at that time, we lived at Milwaukee and Roscoe, which is about 2 blocks south of Addison Street. 2 blocks south of Addison Street and 2 blocks north of Belmont on Milwaukee. And I took the Cicero Avenue streetcar all the way to, I was right by Crawford. I took Crawford, that's what I did. But somehow or other I got out to the Cicero Avenue, and I took that to its end, and then a bus to Archer Avenue, and then the bus on Archer Avenue went west as far as it went, which was Harlem Avenue. And then I was in Summit, Illinois. Then I walked from there. They told me it was only a mile or so up the road. So I walked from there, and I walked about 6 miles, and boy, it was cold. I was almost froze then. And I walked all the way to Electromotive, which was almost at Mannheim at that time, and Joliet Road. And I guess it was 66th Street South. And when I got in there, the guy says, "You mean to tell me you walked all the way from there?" And he says, "Hell, you got a job." So I got my job at Electromotive then. I think it was January 8th or 9th, 1938. And they weren't finished with the plants, but they said, "Can you run what can you operate?" I said, "Well, I was operating a King mill last." They said, "Geez, we're looking for a guy for a King mill." So I was the 8th employee hired out there, and I went to work. The job had to be nights at that time. But they arranged for a guy that lived somewhere near Milwaukee and Roscoe that also worked out there, so I would have a ride. I didn't have a car then, so I would have a ride to and from work, and I think we used to pay this guy, there was about 4 of us rode, each of us paid him a quarter a day. At that time, I guess gas was cheap, and it paid for his gas and a little extra on the side. So then I worked there from 1938 until I think it was 53. And that's when I left to go to a Ford Motor Company because you guys were getting away from me. I was working nights, and I didn't get to see you. You and Mick, and troubles were starting to come about, and I felt that it wasn't worth it. You needed the guidance. So pretty much from there on, you know what the rest of our life was. But when we were young, we'll go back to what Ma, she always thought she was Margaret Winnick. And she never knew until, about, it must have been 1960 or so, that her name wasn't Winnick. She always thought she was part Jewish. And she found out her name was Heffron. She was born Margaret Heffron, the daughter of Michael Heffron and Margaret Burrow. And Auntie Babe told her. See, when Grandma was young, she was in a neighborhood around Ashland and Grand Avenue. And one of her boyhood friends, or one of her childhood friends, was a fellow named Shields, who later turned out to be Bishop Shields. And she went to him. I remember her meeting him one day, and he says, "Oh, Maggie," and he threw his arms around her. They're all really old friends. She had gone to him and didn't want Ma to know that she wasn't the daughter of Mike Winnick. And he actually fixed it up so that she got a baptismal and everything else from Our Lady of Angels as Margaret Winnick. And that's what we used when we got married. That was what we presented to get our marriage certificate to St. Francis Xavier Church near Diversey and California, somewhere through there. So, again, Ma always thought her name was Margaret Winnick. And here, this Michael Heffron was her father, and Ma and him separated when Ma was about 4 or 5 years old, but she didn't remember any of that. And Auntie Babe finally told us because Ma wanted to meet Ed Burrow's mother, Auntie Sid, who was out at the Indian Lake in Dowagiac, and Ma and I were coming from Detroit one time, and she says, "My Auntie Sid's out there, let's see if we can find it." I used to go out there when I was a kid. We used to be out there all the time. So we got out there, and Auntie Sid was there, but she was married to a fellow named Heffron, who was the brother of Michael Heffron, Ma's real father. So Babe knew that we were seeing Auntie Sid, so she told us a story, and then we had to get affidavits and all that sort of thing, go down and change the birth certificates in the county building, so it shows Ma as her name being Margaret Heffron instead of Margaret Winnick. But nobody ever knew that her name was anything else. All her girlhood friends and all that, which she's always been raised at. Funny thing about it was that, in those days, back in the early days in the 30s, we used to go up to like Channel Lake and I'm trying to think of another, Cedar Lake. Yeah, that was another one up in the chain of lakes. And they used to have a big sign across, Gentiles only. And Ma didn't want to go in. She said, "Oh, they're discriminating," She wouldn't want to go in because she thought she was part Jewish. And she used to get so mad if people told Jewish jokes and all that. Because, her father was a good guy, Mike Winnick, the one that really raised her. He was a hell of a good guy. Besides being an alderman, he had worked for quite a bit with Ma's uncle, who was Patty Burrow, who was the head of the International Teamsters and Chauffeurs Unions before the Rackets took it over. As a matter of fact, he was up at the Wajak, and they were playing cards on the back porch there at Indian Lake, and Ma was sitting out there too, and they were playing pinochle, and I think there was 4 of them, and they were playing 3-handed pinochle, and dummy sits out. Well, the doorbell rang, and Uncle Pat was the dummy at the time. He said, "I'll get it," and he walks to the front, and the next thing they heard, the machine guns. They killed him. They had been trying to take over his union anyhow. So the guys that killed him were pretty well known to Ma's other uncle, who was Patty's brother, was Mike Burrow. And Mike was a real tough son of a gun. I can remember one time, well, I'll go back to that story later, but all of these guys that were in on the killing of Patty Burrow eventually all got it too. There was Machine Gun Jack McGurn, a guy named Red Barker, and I can't think of the other one, but they all got it in time too. But the syndicate did finally, or the crime syndicate then, they finally did take over the union, because the guy that succeeded Pat when he got killed was a pretty old guy. He was way up near 80. His name was Steve Summers, and they just ousted him up. And then from that on, the International Teamsters and Chauffeurs Union was racket control, right up to Jimmy Hoffa and Fitzsimmons and all of them today. But at the time, after Patty got killed, like I said earlier, I was tending bar for Grandma Garham, but she always called herself Burrow. The old-time union people and the old-time people in the old Teamsters Union knew Patty so well, and they knew she was running this here tavern and that. They used to come in, they'd see her name on the back, and they'd say, they'd throw a $100 bill on the bar, and they'd ask for a short beer, and they'd say, "Ring it up." Gee, the first time they did that to me, I started making changes. I said, "Ring it up." And they said, "Just so." No. Then the big tears would come around. They'd tell about how great this Patty was, took care of them when they were sick, and paid for the kids in the hospital and all that sort of thing. You know, everybody liked the guy. So here they were kind of paying back and giving it to as much money as they could to Grandma Garham at that time. But we finally had to fold the tavern. Ed Garham just was too much of a good time Charlie. He was taking Ma all over the country and spending more money than we were taking in, and that's, of course, about the time Grandpa Becker got me into the post office, so that brings you up to date on that. We'll go back to some of the times when we did have the tavern. That's when we got real close to Ann and Whitey, friends, and of course they stood up for our wedding and all that. But the syndicates were, at that time, were trying to take over the beer business because they had lost out on the prohibition. And one of the biggest breweries they took over at that time was the Rheingold Brewery, and they had another one called Manhattan, and some of these beers have disappeared. But the Rheingold Brewery, what these guys would do is come in and say, "How many barrels you want?" We say, "Well, we're getting Manhattan." They say, "Nope, you gotta take this," and we had to take their beer. So they didn't make us take it exclusively. They wouldn't want to get into a gang fight, so we had to take, if we used 4 barrels a week, we'd have to take one from Rheingold, one from Manhattan, and that's the way it went right down the line, and one from Blatz. That was control that time. And And of course, some of those turned out to be legitimate business, but I think Rheingold Manhattan is folded up now. But they used to give Ma and I a little ticket so that we could go to the brewery. We'd give them this ticket, and we get a free quarter barrel of beer. So we used to throw it in the car and then go over to Ann and Whitey's, and we'd play cards, and we'd drink beer all night until the whole quarter barrel popped. Sometimes there'd be another couple, but mostly it was just a couple of us. And then in them days, also the liquor. Some of the liquor, there was distributors were also under control of some of the old syndicate bunch. And I remember Powers Liquor Company. I think they were at that time, that was a big outfit. They were at Madison and Crawford. And they used to give Ma and I cases of bubbly Sauterne or small bottles of champagne. And one time we got a trunk full of all different kinds of liquors. It was from all over the world, Tafelakova from Sweden and something else from tequila, and you name it. And that used to be our Christmas gift. And Ma and I used to go to Ann and Whitey's, and we'd pop these corks until we put so many dents in our ceiling they had to move. We'd done it to plaster from popping the champagne corks in there. It was a funny one. Well, a little more about some of Grandma Garam's background. Her Uncle Pat, her brother Pat, which was Ma's Uncle Pat, when he was the head of the International Teamsters and Chauffeurs Union, he had a nice big home up in Park Ridge, which was that time called No Man's Land. No Man's Land meaning that anybody from the syndicate or anything else could live up there and they'd have no interference, no problem, no robberies, no nothing, no gang wars or anything else. It was a place where it was absolutely safe. And Pat at that time and all the syndicates people, they were trying to get in on him, but so he went there because he knew it was safe, because they couldn't mow him down up there at his home up there, because it was a no-no to do anything like that in Park Ridge. And there was a guy named Toohey who was in the gangs later on, but he was a friend of Pat's, so much so that he was also Ma's godfather. And Toohey later on, there's quite a story about him. They call him Terrible Tommy Toohey or something like that. It was all over the papers. He had escaped from being convicted for something or other. And it took him about 10 years before they found him, and it was all over the papers when you guys were young guys. But they used to sit up in a roadhouse on one of the only roads that went north that time to be able to get into Park Ridge. They were at the roadhouse at River Road and just a little bit north of Lawrence Avenue. And anybody wanted to go in there used to have to go there first and check in with them, and I guess they took their guns and they let them go on into Park Ridge. They had about 4 of these here stations in different places. But you heard a little bit about her Uncle Pat. Grandma Garam used to be a little redhead, and she used to spend a lot of her time, she and Mike Winnick were great fans of the fight game. They used to go to all these club fights and watch all the fights. And she was pretty tough herself. She was a good ball player. She played with the Western Bloomer Girls, which was a league ball team, regular hardball, And there were women from all over the country. Some of them were graduates of Wellesley and whatnot, but they played even big league teams. And they used to have a man first baseman and a man catcher, and the rest of it was all women. And Mike Winnick, they came from the headquarters were in his neighborhood, in his ward. So they used to take a high school guy, ball player, catcher, and a first baseman, and the two high schools which were in his ward at that time. And they used to go with the girls and play all over. They played in Mexico and all through the South during the spring training. They'd play all the big league teams and that. And matter of fact, they had a pitcher there. Her name was Jackie Searle. She was so good, she threw a knuckleball, and she could control, make it tip once to the left or once to the right. And they wrote her up one time. They said, Shades of the World Series. She struck out Ruth, Gehrig, and Lazari, on her knuckleball. And I got to go with the team as a man and a catcher part of one season. I couldn't stay for long because I couldn't go in the spring because I was still in school. But another guy named Johnny McCarthy went as first baseman. He was a Lane Tech ball player. He played first base for that. And Johnny McCarthy later got out to where he was playing first base for the Yanks. And so, and Grandma Garm, like I said at that time, she was a good ball player. She was a shortstop, and she used to hug the plate and crowd the plate, and practically dare the pitcher to brush her off. But if he tried to, she'd take the shot on the hip or on the shoulder or something like that, and the crowd would get unruly and go ready to lynch the pitcher. That happened one time in Mexico. They chased the guy right out, and the soldiers had to come and protect him. But she had quite